Okay, hi everyone. I'm Poojakant Alfred from emofreetherapy.com. And today is the third part of the FB Live series that I've been doing. It's called Making Emotions Our Allies. And today's topic is emotional hijacking of the brain. So think of a time when you felt that you completely lost it, when your emotions overtook your rational behavior and your thinking, and you were just in that moment enraged or feeling something so strongly that you couldn't think clearly. And that's literally the emotional hijacking of the brain. So, what really happens is that before I go into that, let me first explain the three parts of the brain, roughly speaking, called the triune brain. So, at the base of the brain skull, you have the reptilian brain. Above that is the mammalian brain. And then this is the frontal cortex, the neocortex, the thinking brain. And the emotions, they arise in the mammalian brain, which is the midbrain, you can say. Now, this is the limbic system, and this is what gets affected much before your thinking brain comes online. So, what happens is that your sensory organs, so let's say your ears, your eyes pick up information from the environment, and these signals are sent to the thalamus. And from there, it goes to the neocortex, which is the thinking brain, to put it simply. And then the brain recognizes these sensory inputs and it sends it to the limbic brain, which is the mammalian brain, to make sense of it and to the rest of the body. And this is how it works most of the time. But there was a neuroscientist called Joseph Ledoux. And his work is so interesting because he discovered a shorter pathway that goes directly to from the thalamus to the amygdala. It goes, instead of going to the thinking brain, usually from the thalamus it goes to the thinking brain, the neocortex. From the thalamus, this goes directly to the amygdala and it bypasses the thinking brain. So what happens is that the amygdala, it receives direct inputs and it starts responding even before your thinking brain can respond. So you're in the throes of the emotions, you're immediately responding to what's happening even before making sense of what's happening. And so basically, there are two pathways, one that carries information from the emotional brain and the other that carries to the thinking brain. But this special pathway bypasses all of that and it goes directly to the amygdala. There's a research about, this was in the book by Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence. There was a young man who was having seizures, and in order to control that, his amygdala was removed. And that led to losing all of his recognition of feelings. So, amygdala, if we see, is responsible for feelings, recognition of them, the sensory input that we get from the environment, whatever we see, we it is all scanned by the amygdala. And if something is threatening or it is triggering, your amygdala starts uh, acting and it sends crisis alert to all parts of your brain. And then your body goes into the fight flight response and your sympathetic nervous system comes online, of course. And once the stress passes, the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, comes back and your body goes to the baseline, which is it becomes calm. Now, this is very effective. This whole mechanism is very effective in life saving situations where you need to react immediately. You see a car coming and you have to get out of the way. So it's really good in those kind of threatening situations. What happens is, even when there is an imaginary threat, the brain can react in the same way as it would to a real threat. And the research, it shows, the brain scans show that, this was very interesting, I was reading about it, that the areas of the brain that light up when you have a physical pain, those same areas light up when you have emotional pain. So what happens in imagined threat is that your amygdala again acts in the moment, and the thinking brain goes offline, and you're not able to take think clearly or take a conscious decision. So Ledoux' work, Joseph Ledoux, shows that there is a sensory signal that travels from your sensory organs, and it goes to the thalamus, and then across a single synapse it goes to the amygdala. And so this single synapse route to amygdala, it explains how sometimes our thinking brain completely goes offline and rationality is hijacked by our emotions. And there's another interesting thing that we hold emotional impressions and memories that have no conscious recognition. Because what happens is when you're experiencing something, it is held, those emotional impressions are held in your amygdala. And the dry facts about the situation, the context, they are held in your hippocampus, which is for the memory, storage, and organization, and all of that. So what happens is these emotional expressions, impressions, they have, you're not aware of them, but they're still there, and that's when something gets triggered. When you get triggered, these emotional impressions come up, and you would not even have thought of them because these are picked up at that time during that threatening situation. So, like I said, the amygdala, it holds the emotional responses, and the hippocampus, it holds the context of those responses. So, the difference between, let's say, looking at the snake on the TV and looking at the snake in the garden. So, the fear is stored in your amygdala, and the context, whether it's on the TV or it's in the garden, is what is stored in your hippocampus. And so Daniel Goleman, he says that there are two memories. One is for the facts and one is for emotionally charged memories. And the amygdala's role is to scan the present situation, compare it with the past, and see if there is any similarity, and then react if it feels there's danger. And he talks about faulty neural alarms. These are faulty neural alarms because it may not even be threatening, and yet your body is reacting. For example, let's say you were listening to a song while you were driving, and suddenly a car hit the bumper of your car. And so whenever you hear that song, you might get triggered because you get reminded of that accident, that thing happening. So what happens is these survival emotions, they come in very quickly because the body has to be ready to take care of whatever the threat is, and it has to react to the danger. And of course, after the threat passes, the body goes back to the normal state. But sometimes what happens is that you are triggered for a long time, and this happens many times, in fact. And you're triggered for a long time, and the body keeps secreting those stress hormones, cortisol, and it stays in that state, and that's what can also lead to chronic physical issues. So coming back to the, we were talking about emotional hijack by the brain. So um, two things happen. One is that the amygdala gets triggered, of course, it gets activated, and your thinking brain, the neocortex, it is offline. It is not activated. It's not, you cannot think at that time, and you get overwhelmed and you're flooded with emotions. So, when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's very important to educate yourself about emotions. How, what happens when you're emotional? What happens when you suddenly get into these kind of situations where the emotions take hold and they overtake you. So, emotional intelligence is basically having a mid path between, basically having a balance between the emotional brain and the thinking brain or the rational brain. And that's why we need to understand emotions. We need to know different ways of working with emotions, and all this awareness can help us regulate our emotions. So that's all for today. I'm going to keep it short again. And in the next FB Live series, I'm going to be talking about another interesting topic related to this. And like I said before, I'll be talking about the how to feel emotions in a healthy way without them becoming excessive or unhealthy. That's going to be part of the upcoming episodes as well. So that's all for today. If you have any questions, feel free to post them, and I'm going to get to those questions after this is over. And it is going to get over right now. So thank you for listening. and I'll see you again.